this working? Is this working? I'm pleased to call to order tonight's town informational meeting for March 5th, 2024. Can everybody hear me okay? Muffled? So-so? How about that? How about that? How about this? Oh, okay. So not that. This. Got it. All right. So I want to welcome everyone to tonight's town informational meeting. My name is Peter Orner. I'm honored to serve as town moderator. For the past 200 plus years or so, Norwich has come together to obtain important information as well as civilly discuss important issues facing our town. Though we no longer vote at this gathering, this meeting does serve the same purpose as it's always served, and that is to exchange information. This is not a select board meeting. This is not a school board meeting, although we're thrilled that both entities are here. And it's my job tonight to ensure that this is not too long a night, and at the same time, to ensure that everyone who wishes to be heard has that option. We've got a lot to do tonight, so we're going to get started. I've got a couple preliminary issues, however, to tell you about. And that is that we are going to start the evening with welcoming our elected representatives, and Rebecca Holcomb and Jim Maslin, and then we are going to move into the Select Board's presentation given by Town Manager Brennan Duffy. After that, we're going to go through Articles 1 through 13 in order, one after the other. I will read them, and the townspeople, you all, will have the opportunity to comment or ask any questions that you deem important to you, and the Select Board will do their best to answer. I'm giving everybody 2 minutes to speak tonight, so please keep your comments concise and focused. After Article 13, I'm going to ask you all your permission, because again, this is the people's meeting, to insert, before we do the rest of the articles, the school board articles 39 through 41. It's an order for parents who are here, maybe if they have to go home to their kids, or people on Zoom have to put their kids to bed, and I think that everybody needs and wants to hear the school board information and discuss those warrant articles. So with your permission, I would like to insert after Article 13, Articles 39 through 41, in which case after that we will go right back to Article 14 to the end, however long that takes. Can I get a voice vote or hands in favor of this change? All right, I'm going to call it we're going to do it. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So I want to first bring up Rebecca Holcomb, from our state representative from Windsor Orange District 2, to speak for 4 minutes. Oh, wait. Oh, Jim is going to start. So Jim, welcome. Thank you for being here, and I'd like to keep your comments to 4 minutes, but we welcome you and thank you for being here.
You want me to just shout from here? Hold on there.
Here comes the mic.
Hi there. Very nice to see you once again. Is this on? Everybody hear me okay? No? Better? No? It says it's on. Is that a little bit better maybe? All right. Anyway, nice to see you once again. and it's a pleasure and honor, I've said this before, to serve you folks at Montpelier, and I also tell you that serving with Rebecca is a distinct pleasure and honor because she's one of the hardest working representatives up there, to the best of my knowledge and belief. The other thing that all of us in Montpelier know is this is a very difficult year. It's difficult for those of us who serve in Montpelier. It's difficult for all of you with families or without, kids at home. It's just a very, very, very hard time for all of us, and we all feel the stress and strain and whatever it is, but it's our privilege to try to work our way through this, so feel free to contact us anyway, because it's our job to answer you as best we can and try to help solve what we think are sometimes intractable problems. There's been a whole lot of discussion about the education fund this year, so I'm just going to talk about that in one respect, which is there are a lot of things that are in the education fund that probably shouldn't be anymore. They should be standalone items that we discuss openly and budget separately, and I'll just give you a couple of them. One of this is student mental health. It's very, very important that we deal with the situation since the economic meltdown and COVID and whatnot. But what happens is that falls back on the school budget, and it's becoming increasingly expensive to the extent where we should probably pull it out of the education fund, pull it out of school district budgets, and have it as a standalone issue that we discuss and appropriate separately so that all of us can see what we're getting. We should do it, but it shouldn't be stuck on the school boards to pick up the slack, which is getting very expensive. There are a lot of things in the education fund that probably deserve to be somewhere else. Another one is something called early college and also dual enrollment that some people may understand, which is opportunity for high school seniors, basically, to be enrolled in college at the same time that they're finishing their high school degree. That's very important because some kids who don't get this opportunity would never think of going on to college. And I'm a firm believer of post-secondary education. There's all kinds of benefits that come out of that. I may be about to get the hook, but I'll try to sum this up. It's very important, but it comes out of the education fund, which means it's sort of out of sight and out of mind until the school board tries to deal with what they get from as state aid to education. And there's a whole host of these things that probably they're there by design or by default. And we could spend all evening talk about the ed fund, but I just want you to understand that there are complexities that have developed over the years that we need to sort them out. Maybe, in fact, we need a whole new education funding formula, not at 60, which is now 26, I think, 27 years old. It's kind of run its course, I think, or at least needs some substantial modification. And that, Mr. Town Moderator, is probably my time. But Rebecca and I will be here. I'll be at the back of the room. We can speak softly, and you know how to get a hold of us any day, and that's what we look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim Maslin. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And just to start off, in case I forget, there is a brief handout in the back that gives updates on some of the things we've been working on. So if you want to know what bills are coming through, you can go read it at the back. Also, cartoon books from the cartoon school are back there. If you have children at home, go get a bunch. They're great coloring books, and they talk about democracy in Vermont, so good thing. Jim is in the Ways and Means Committee, which works on the tax formulas, including the education fund formula. I agree with him. It's broken. It isn't working. And we do need to give every child a fair chance. This particular formula is inflationary, but is silent on what we spend our dollars on. And so the only way this will go is more cost and less quality. That's sort of where we're stuck right now. And we do need to, again, give kids a fair chance, but this formula is even burdening communities with very high proportions of kids who are disadvantaged, so it isn't working. So that will be a big priority of this session and the next session. Jim mentioned a bunch of things that we ought to take out of the education fund. You know, $50 million this year is just from the cost of healthcare increases on teacher benefits. I know some of you are probably feeling that pinch on healthcare as well at home in your family budget. We need to do some work on that. We also know that it is mental health. It's also increased tuitioning, and Vermont is now paying tuition in districts that don't have high schools to private schools out of state and private schools that are religious, now post-Carson, including schools that are openly refusing to comply with Vermont discrimination statutes. We cannot fund bullying and then claim to have any moral authority on harassment and bullying. We cannot fund exclusion or any institution that strips people of their civil rights and say that we care about civil rights. This is going to have to be discussed, and we will discuss this in the coming session. So these are the kinds of things we're trying to grapple with. My position is in the House Appropriations, and what I can tell you is we did see this fantastic wave of federal funding in the last several years. It has now receded. When that federal funding was here, it also increased state revenues. We are starting this current year with a deficit of about $17 million. That federal funding is gone, and with it is also the state surplus. That's gone too. So budgets are tight this year, and that means the kinds of conversations we're having are about how to get maximum value for Vermonters on the things that matter. It's housing. I hear that everywhere. It's affordable housing, and it's going to have to be the responsibility of every community. Even here in Norwich, that's the fastest way to bring down our education property taxes. As Neil said, I cannot finish without giving my enormous gratitude to our school board. They planned a budget, they tried to put it forward, and they got a message from the legislature saying cut it. They put together some more budgets, and they kept working, and then they got this change in the funding formula. Basically, imagine you went out to lunch with all your friends, you're splitting the bill, and everyone told you your bill's not going up more than 5%. If you were told that, you would do what a lot of districts did. You'd spend up. Some districts put in 3 years of bond payments this year. They prepaid. What happened is our total spending was up $253 million. That would have been a 20-cent increase in everybody's tax bill right out of the gate without even the change in weights that you're about to hear about. People can't afford that. That's just a reality. So what the legislature did was come back in this new bill that was just rushed through and say, it's as if the waiter came back to you and said, did you really want to order that? So the person who ordered a lot, the lobster and the champagne, is now being said, do you really want to spend that much? Is that time? And the waiters come back and said, check your order. We're going to check your order and give districts a chance to ask again. Your board did trim their budgets. They're doing their bit. Across the state of Vermont right now, I've gone to 4 town meetings in the last 3 days. People are pulling out what they can. The more people pull out, the lower your tax bill will be in the future. Unlike most years when your school board can kind of tell you what your tax rate's going to be in the spring, they can't tell you that right now. It's anyone's guess. That is not their fault. So I'm asking you, please, today, to be gentle to your school board. I'm a little biased. I think you got one of the best school boards in the state, if not the best. They've been working really hard. They've been given a very difficult situation by us in the legislature. I am sorry about that. I am deeply grateful to my home school board, and I will be working extremely hard to make sure we are not in this situation next year. And I know Jim will as well. We will be in the back of the room. If you have questions, come find us. Get our handout if you want to email us. Our address is on that, and reach out. This is a breaking point for public education in the state of Vermont. On capacity to pay, on quality, on construction. We have $6 billion in unfunded school liabilities with construction. This is a make it or break it moment for public education in the state of Vermont. If you have strong feelings, let us know, because we can carry your stories back to our colleagues in the legislature, and they need to hear them now if you have opinions. So please do, again, go to the back of the room, get our flyer, get our email address, and let us know if you have questions or concerns. And thank you so much for being here today to participate in this active democracy. This is a time when we all need to engage as much as possible to hold on to what we care about in Vermont. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you. Again, thanks to our elected state representatives for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. So we are going to launch right into the Select Board's presentation, and that is going to be given to us tonight by Town Manager Brennan Duffy.
All right, thank you very much, Peter. Everybody hear me okay? All right, so as noted, I am the now permanent town manager. I've been here for about 5 months in that capacity, and before that I served for about 9 months as an intern. So I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm happy to be presenting on behalf of the Select Board our presentation at the informational meeting. I'm going to introduce our Select Board. We have our chair at the end, Marcia Calloway. We have Vice Chair Mary Layton. We have Roger Arnold, Pam Smith, and Priscilla Vincent. So we thought that the following 3 slides would be useful in updating the voters on our current staffing levels here in the town. So the next slide is going to talk about my office. So again, I've been here now for 5 months in September as the permanent town manager. With me in the town manager's office is our assistant town manager, Miranda Bergmeyer. She's been here for about 7 years now and is one of our longest serving staff. In our office, and when you see the slides, we have highlighted in yellow kind of our currently open positions. So we have a half-time administrative assistant position that is currently vacant and is something we are looking to fill here. In the finance office, we have Barry Rosalinda, who is helping me tonight work the PowerPoint slides. Barry has been with us since August. She's doing a great job in the finance office. Serving with her is our staff accountant, Ashley Wohler, 3 years now. So folks have probably had a chance to meet them already, if not in the last couple weeks with the tax payments due. We also, in our planning department, have an open position for our director of planning, and that's also considered a zoning administrator, so kind of a dual role there. That has been an open position now for well over a year. We've tried a couple times to market and promote that. We will continue to try and fill that critical position. I will say right now we've been helped by the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission. They have given us on a part-time basis, about 10 hours a week, a staff of theirs who comes in. His name is Kyle Katz, and he's done a nice job of helping us keep the office running smoothly while we search for a permanent position there. And he is also assisted there by Pam Mullen, who is our planning assistant, who again has been a long-serving member of the Norwich staff. Next slide. We have in the fire department, Chief Alex Northern, who is sitting in the back there. I think most people know Chief Northern by now. He's also assisted in his duties by Deputy Chief Matt Sweat. I'm not sure if Matt's here tonight. I didn't see him yet, but most of you probably know Matt as well. And 22 volunteer firefighters in that department. We also have some exciting news. Most have probably heard this. We have retained a chief of police, and that gentleman is also in the back. Matt, if you want to stand up. Matt Romei. So Matt had served for about 6 months in an interim capacity and was hired about a month ago into the permanent role, and we're thrilled to have him. We also have currently a sergeant, Stuart Rogers, who's working in the department. We have 2 open positions currently for patrol officers, and we have an administrative assistant. I'm happy to say as of today, I believe we have filled that role. We were able to find a very well qualified individual who is interested in coming to Norwich and will now be serving in that capacity. Her start date will be about the middle of the month, and we'll have some more details coming out about who that is. Our Public Works Department, Director Chris Kaufman, our working foreman John McKinnon. We have the other half of that administrative position, which we were planning to split with the DPW. So basically we have half an open position there still. We currently have 3 equipment operators, 1 open position there that we have been seeking to fill for quite some time, and are hopeful we'll find the right person for that soon. We have 2 building and ground technicians and 3 transfer station operators working out of that department. And then our recreation department, we have our long-serving recreation director, Bree Smunson, who is in the back of the room as well, who most people know. All right, and then we have also our elected officials and staff working in Tracy Hall. Our treasurer, long-serving treasurer, Cheryl Lindberg, I think is in the back row there. Hi, Cheryl. And we have 2 assistant treasurers that help Cheryl in her duties, and she is also a lister. So our lister's office consists right now of Ernie Ciccatelli, Cheryl, as I mentioned, and Jonathan Vincent. We have currently an assessor role there that is open at the moment, working through how that will be filled. And then Cheryl also serves as a lister's clerk in that office, along with an outside contractor named Amanda Boulier, I think that's how you pronounce that, who is assisting Cheryl in the duties there of the office. And then in the front row, we have Lily Tryman, and I've been pronouncing her name wrong here for a year, but we've probably all met Lily in her capacity. All right, so with that, we're going to move on. The following slides are focused on the fiscal year 25 budget. So just some broad goals here from the select board as they went into this budgeting season. Wanting to keep the annual tax increase as low as we possibly could, use the surplus wisely, and we'll be talking about that in great detail here in future slides. Short and long-term planning for capital investment in expenditures and infrastructure. In a little more detail, so components, considerations for setting the fiscal year budget. A capital plan, saving for anticipated capital expenditures that we know are going to hit us down the road. Routine expenses of running the town, salaries, supplies, things like that. Unanticipated expenses, as we know we're living in a changing world right now. Climate emergencies seem to be increasing. We have price changes, so that's a factor. The income that we're able to bring in via taxes or fees or other means. And then the surplus monies, which again we're going to talk about in more detail. These are monies that are budgeted in prior years, but are neither committed nor spent. And this money needs to be returned to the voters to decide how that will be used. So again, the recommendations for the fiscal year budget, the goals of keeping the annual tax increases low and planning ahead for Norwich's future needs. I just want to speak briefly about the process. So we had gotten a much earlier start on the budget this year than we did last year. We really kicked this off in late September, early October. We were led at that time in the finance department by our interim finance director, Joyce Hasbrook, who had been with us for about a year, had gone through the prior year's budget, and she was really instrumental in creating a lot of information. But this really kicked off in October with meetings of all the department heads. We sat down with them, we talked about specifically capital investment needs, where they thought they were going to be as far as needing equipment over the next 10 years, and a very, I think, thoughtful and thorough process there to determine what those needs really were. The select board review began in November. We held almost weekly meetings at that point. And that led to a final approved budget that was voted on by the select board on December 13th, and that's what you are going to be voting on tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about a little bit more this evening. So the next slide. So this is a table that was part of one of the workbooks Joyce had put together as we were talking through the budgeting process here. The fiscal year 25 budget has $700,000 in surplus infusion, and without the monetary articles is a relatively flat budget. So you see down in the far right corner there's in except the purple, a highlighted $700,000 in surplus funds, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. If all articles are passed tomorrow, we're looking at a 3.19% increase over the last year, and that's if all articles pass. So the other two highlighted cells there, if you look in the top right corner, 12.66 is the percent of the increase without that $700,000 tax infusion that the select board has voted to approve and put onto the next year's tax rate. At the bottom, that shows that there's actually a 0.02% increase. So again, as I said, this is really a flat budget that's being proposed at this point. Next slide, please. So this slide is really to demonstrate that most of the increase in our fiscal year 25 budget is due to operational costs, primarily salary and benefits. And I think this is not unique to Norwich. This is being seen in municipalities all over. If you look there, it might be hard to see from the back, but the benefits piece is really one of the major drivers of this increase, and that went up 16.63% from the last year. So the total there was a 5.17% increase. The lower table is really just calling out that a lot of this is a budget based on our operational cost increases and on our capital planning investment. So the graph on the next slide is going to show the necessity of increasing the town's capital allocations, which went up 6.42% from the last year. And what we're looking at there is trying to catch ourselves up on deferred capital planning. So this next slide shows a graph.
Brandon, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
With apologies. Richard is going to try and get rid of that sound. There's a lot of feedback and it's hard to hear. So we're just going to take a quick pause if that's okay. We're grateful for Richard. Everything that Richard does.
Please use the stairs when you go back down.
All right, let me go down. Okay. The back way. Yeah. Just come around. You can set that. Thank you. Why don't we continue, Brendan, and see how it goes? And if you could raise your voice if people have trouble hearing you, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to do that. It's kind of like freezing your picture here. All right, so as I mentioned, this graph I think is a really nice visual of where we would be, and the green line at the top represents if our capital investment had kept up with our cost of living allocation in this fiscal year's budget, we would be on that green line. Instead, we tracked this and we were on our orange line, which shows a pretty steep decrease in the funding that went into the capital appropriations. As you can see from that graph, a lot of that might have had to do with the COVID pandemic in 2020, where those dropped off significantly. Now, what we're trying to do at this point is to increase our planning and our budgeting for these capital expenditures. Again, the orange line shows that the actual allocations from 2015 have fallen over the years, and the shortfall based on level fiscal year 15 funding is a little over $2 million. The orange line, as I said, represents the actual allocations fell well below the full annual increase over this period. And it is important that the town of Norwich begins to budget appropriately for our future capital requirements. Next slide, please. So part of this discussion has the center around objections to using this $700,000 surplus. And I want to just be very clear about the thought process that went into doing this. So we have audited financials for fiscal year 23, which show approximately $1.8 million surplus. Some of that was from the former ARPA funds that went through a process in the town where they became surplus money. Some of that was prior year surplus, over $700,000. So when we looked at this budget, when we looked at the increase, and we realized that there was also going to be a significant increase in the educational fund funding through taxes, the board had decided that we have a kind of unique opportunity here to infuse $700,000 into our budget to help buy down that tax rate. So again, what we are doing tonight is asking through the voting on the budget to affirm that $700,000 in that surplus funds will be used for that purpose.
That will be done here at the end of the fiscal year if approved. I also just want to point out that we have within the town a Fund 50. And the Fund 50 is basically an emergency fund that is appropriated and must be kept between 12 and 16% of the total operating budget for the town. So that was looked at in the budgeting process. We determined that we had an amount of $759,000 that was going to be kept in that Fund 50. That is something that is not being talked about today as the surplus. And again, I will refer folks that have questions about this to page 8 of our audited report for fiscal year 23, which really clearly breaks down the actual amounts of funding in the different categories. So I want to just reiterate that the Fund 50 is not a piece of the surplus that we're talking about. Next slide, please. So proposed use of I just want to reiterate here that there's been some confusion that's been created by terminology of what is our actual surplus funding that we're talking about using for different purposes tonight, equating to all in the designated fund account. The Fund 50 account balance, as I mentioned, is about $760,000. That equates to 12.24% of our operating budget. It is not part of the surplus we're asking the voters to vote on. It is annually held between that 12 and 16% and cannot be used to buy down the tax rate per the town's master financial policies. The approximately $1.8 million in surplus needs to be returned to the voters, and this is being done in two ways. The $700,000 surplus I just talked about being infused into the budget to buy down our tax rate for the coming year, and 3 separate articles that would commit funds to unique purposes, and we'll be talking about those in future slides here. Okay, so next slide, I think we might have skipped one. I don't want to go into too much detail more than I have there. I think people understand that the $700,000 surplus infusion is something we're asking the voters to vote tomorrow on the budget if they support using that allocation to buy down the tax rate. If they choose not to do that, the solution would be to vote no on our budget. But we're hopeful that we will see affirmative votes for that. I do actually go back to that slide, just one more clarification here. So at the last select board meeting, I was asked to contact our town council and just affirm that there was nothing being done here with the surplus being infused into the budget that would be considered improper or illegal, as some had claimed. So the quote at the bottom here comes directly from our council. The voters will approve the use of the surplus and the tax reduction when they approve the budget. And any lingering questions can be addressed fully at the public information hearing tonight, which is what we are doing. So Barry, now, next slide, please. This is kind of another visual that will, I think, just help people understand kind of how the financial pieces of our budget work. We have the big piece here, which is our general fund, and a smaller piece of that pie, which is our reserve funds. And we have different rules for how money can be put into those and how money can be taken out of those. The reserve funds need select board approval to do so, to take money out, and voter approval to put money in. The general fund is a little bit more flexible there. And again, the bottom piece of that chart just shows how, again, we arrived at that $1.8 million of audited surplus, and then the $700,000 in infusion being removed from that, which leaves us with approximately $1 million here that we are talking about. And I'm going to go to the next slide. So my segue there is how do we want to use that remaining surplus? And this is, again, a question that is going to go to the voters of Norwich tomorrow when we go to the polls. Before I I get to that, I just want to explain that there were 2 public listening sessions that occurred in January, held by the Select Board, set up to solicit ideas for uses of that $1 million surplus. We had several presentations from citizens who had ideas about how that could be used. Following that engagement process, the Select Board agreed to present 3 options to voters for their approval. And the next slide lists those 3 options. So these are actually going to be on the ballot tomorrow when you come in to vote. There is an opportunity to fund the fire apparatus fund in an amount of $300,000. There is an ability to put $500,000 into the Tracy Hall Fund, and that money would be used for future investment here at Tracy Hall. We are currently in the process of getting a study completed that's going to give us a better idea of what ideas we might have for that and how much those ideas might cost. And then the last opportunity is a $200,000 investment into the Highway Garage Fund, and that would be used for improvements at the DPW facility, and specifically in the town garage. So again, when you cast your votes tomorrow, those will be 3 questions for you to answer. Again, if folks feel that those are not appropriate uses of the surplus, they can vote no. If people feel that those make sense and you'd like to allocate that surplus $1 million to those 3 or some of those 3, please vote yes. So the last slide I'm going to go through today is just about the ongoing work of our Select Board, our staff, and our town manager's office. So we are continuing our efforts to recruit and retain qualified staff into a fulfilling working environment. And I think if I've heard one thing over the course of my tenure here, it's been the town of Norwich wants to keep qualified, helpful, hardworking staff in our employ. And we've had a hard time doing that. We've been through some tough times, I think, here over the past few years. So in my feeling, we are on a really positive trajectory right now. We've rebuilt some trust. We've tried to regain a more positive culture within Tracy Hall, and I hope that we can continue that work. The second bullet talks about the ongoing documentation of Select Board appointed committees, commissions, and et cetera, basically trying to ensure some efficiency, making sure that the committees are aware of what they're being tasked with, and having an ability to have, I think, better communication back to the Select Board about what work is ongoing. We've taken some affirmative steps here in the past month to begin a pedestrian project along the Beaver Meadow Road that would help get pedestrians and bikes safely to various points of access along that route. As you may have heard, last Wednesday the collective bargaining agreement was ratified by the Select Board, so that was really great positive news. After about an 8-month delay since the end of the fiscal year, our negotiating team of Roger and Mary were able to get an agreement ratified with the union. So that is a great step, and we can move forward now with that. And it's also, I think, a lot of concern has been about hiring police officers into those patrol positions. I know Chief Romeo has been anxiously awaiting ratification of that agreement, so people now know what our pay rates are going to be here for the next 5 years, and that's going to be very helpful to him in his attempts to recruit those positions. As I mentioned, we have a study on Tracy Hall. We've hired an architectural firm, local firm. They're underway. We're still not quite at the point where they've come back with some ideas, but we've done a lot of study on different areas of the Tracy Hall and what we can do to make some improvements and some investments. As part of that, we also had an energy audit that we applied for through the state, got a grant for, and that was actually just completed last week. So we're hopeful that the results of that will help guide our architects in the idea of being as energy efficient here as we possibly can. We're also in the midst of a study where we've hired an outside consultant to look at the compensation plan for the town's employees. And again, that goes back into how do we attract and retain the most qualified employees that we can here in Norwich. And then the last is an ongoing response to last summer's climatic events. And as many people know, Norwich was not as hard hit as other communities in Vermont, but we were not immune either. We currently have specifically nothing changed. Anyway, the Hemlock Road situation, which many people are aware of, is another fairly complex and important project that we continue to work on here with our representatives in various resource organizations. So with that, I am going to end my presentation. I want to thank everybody for your patience there as we work through our technical audio difficulties. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. I want to thank the good people from JAM who I know are doing the best they can to alleviate the thunderous sounds. Feels like we're in a windstorm a little bit, which is appropriate for Vermont. So we're doing the best we can, obviously, but I understand that definitely the audio is probably affecting how you hear. So let me know if you can't hear, and I will ask people to speak up. Okay? All right, so the next step in the night is we're going to go through the articles one by one, and I'm going to ask those of you who would like to comment or ask questions to come to the mic and state your name as well as your comment, and we're going to we will stick to 2 minutes, and I want to hear from as many people as would like to contribute, and we're going to get started. So, the first 3 articles have to do with elected officials, and so we're going to cut to Article 4. And I'm going to read it, and then, again, I'm going to invite public comment. And if you have a direct question for the Select Board or for Brennan, they are welcome to answer, and I'd ask the Board to, please keep your comments, make them as concise as possible as well. Article 4. Shall the voters approve a gross spending general town budget of $2,221,233? Did I say 6? Let me start over. $6,221,223 plus state and federal grants and gifts consistent with budgeting programs for the period July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2005. Math was never mine, strong suit. Public comment. Yes.
On? Yes, you can hear me. Okay. Cheryl Lindbergh, question for the Select Board regarding the $700,000 surplus. I'm confused from the presentation because I don't find anywhere on the warning that there is a town vote to use $700,000 of surplus. The budget article that's presented is the full budget. We only vote on expenditures at town meeting. We don't vote on revenues. So I don't understand how we are voting to approve the use of $700,000 of surplus to buy down the tax rate, which, in my estimation, appears to be a violation of a Select Board policy that exists with the exact wording in the policy. And hopefully when town council was asked about this, they were made aware of the wording of that policy and that they wouldn't encourage the town Select Board to violate that policy. So I'd love to have an answer to better explain how that $700,000 is included in this budget.
Thank you, Sharon. Comment from Brennan?
I will just make a response to that. So as
Please speak up, Brennan.
Okay, so I will make a quick response to that. So as I think we indicated in the presentation, the $700,000 is considered surplus funds. It is not part of the undesignated fund balance that has a policy that says it cannot be used for buying down the tax rate. I think pretty clear that the $1.8 million is separate and distinct from that $700,000. And when we spoke with the town council and informed them of what we were looking to do, it was very clear that we have options with surplus, but they are always to go back to the voters and ask them to ratify the use of that surplus, which is what we are doing, as I said, in two different ways tonight. One, by approval of our budget put forth with the known fact that $700,000 is going to be used to pay down the town's tax rate at the end of this process, if approved. And the second is the three warrant articles that I discussed that are actually going to be moving funds into reserved funds for future use. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Anyone else want to speak to Article 4? Article 4. Gentlemen, sir? Yes.
I'm going to follow up with the last question here, but I don't understand where this 700K appears. Is it already taken into account in Article 4 that the 6221 has a big minus 700 in there, built in? Yes or no?
No.
Well, so how would it change the rates, the tax rates then? Surely the tax rates are based on this funding, 6.22, as well as the educational side. The two together give the rate. How are we going to get reduction in the rate unless 700K appears somewhere?
Thank you, sir. Can you tell me your name, sir? Can you tell us your name? Your name, sir?
Colin Osborne.
Thank you. Brandon?
So I will answer this one more time. I feel like we have answered the question, but $700,000 is surplus funding that is going to be used if the budget is approved to pay down the tax rate, which again will make this basically a flat municipal budget for this year. I think we've had the auditors involved. They've verified that we have that amount of surplus. That is different from any of the other funds that are being discussed right now. And we also know that we have to ask the voters to ratify the use of those funds, which is what we're doing by voting for the budget tomorrow. That $700,000 surplus will go in at the end of the fiscal year to buy down the rate of taxes that you will be paying.
Why isn't that in one of the articles, the 700? Why isn't it in
Sir,
It was decided by the select board and it was verified by council that what we're doing is an appropriate way of seeking voter support, which is what is required. There's nothing that requires a separate warrant article. In fact, it could be confusing or redundant to have a budget approval and then asking at the same time for a warrant that may or may not be approved. So that was the thought process and the decision-making that went into this back in December when this was approved by the board.
thank you, Brandon. Next.
Irv Tony, 528 New Austin Road. Longtime residents may know that back when we had an elected finance committee, I served on it for, I think, a total of 15 years. So I am accustomed to reading budgets, but I find certain aspects of this bewildering. On the one hand, I can't find, it must be in here, but I can't find a prediction of what the town tax rate would be based on our current grand list. I understand we expect the grand list to increase, it always does, but I've always in the past seen what would the tax rate be. On the other hand, as a pragmatist, it seems to me that this fuss about not having a separate article to approve reducing the tax rate by money that we paid in and didn't need to because it didn't get spent. If you didn't do that, you'd be getting pilloried for not doing it. So that part of it seems to me a red herring. I do want to understand better what the tax rate is forecast to be. And I'm going to preview my comments on a later article to say I think it's disingenuous to put a $150,000 proposal and describe it as an outside article, but it's one of your proposals for a fund. So this is all, you've got the outside article cost increasing by 40%. 35% of that is this outside article. Outside article. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Does anyone else want to speak to Article 4 before we move on to Article 5? Joe, I'll give you 1 minute as a follow-up, but generally I want to get through these articles and make sure that everybody can speak to each one of them so we get through the night, but I appreciate it, so go ahead.
Thank you. Again, Cheryl Lindbergh. It would have made a lot of sense to have put an article on the warning for the voters to approve the use of $700,000 as one of the select board members recommended to the rest of the select board at the meeting when this was being discussed. And I supported that because it shows how we're using our money, which is what the surplus is. It's prior tax dollars paid in that didn't get used, and it belongs to us. And so I still am ranting about the 700,000, but the first calculation showed 1.8 million. We're talking 700. We're talking $1 million in capital reserve. Now there's another $100,000 sitting there in the middle that, from my recollection of the select board meeting, they're going to just use that. And there is no explanation of that being used. And I also want to say we should not, with municipal dollars, be concerned about the education tax rates. Those municipal dollars are for the town, and the school board handle the matters of the school rates as they see fit.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Article 5. Article 5, shall the voters approve the movement of all monies in Fund 10, the Police Station Fund, to Fund 47, the Public Safety Fund? Any public comment on Article 5? All right. Moving on to Article 6. Shall the voters approve the movement of all monies in Fund 16, Recreation Fund Dam, to Fund 5, Recreation Facilities and Improvements? Public comment or select board comment? No? Article 7. Shall the voters approve a change in title for Fund 25 from Fire Station Fund to Fire Department Apparatus Bay with a new purpose to be used for the repairs, replacement, and maintenance of the apparatus bay and its mechanical equipment? Public comments? Article 8. Shall the voters approve a change in the purpose of Fund 47, Public Safety Facility, to, quote, be used for the repairs, replacement, and maintenance of the public safety facility and its mechanical equipment? Comments? Article 9. Shall the voters approve the creation of a roadway safety fund with the purpose of purchasing materials and or services to maintain safety on the roadways with an initial funding of $10,000?
I have a question.
Sir, yeah, would you go to the mic, please?
Well, can I just talk loudly?
If you went to the microphone so we can all hear you. Thank you.
Yes, I see. I know nothing about these details, but what can you realistically carry out for 10,000 to abide by Article 9?
Thank you. Select Board?
So I think the purpose
It's your mic, Brendan. I think that's the issue. Maybe you could use a different mic, possibly. Yeah.
I'll look after I
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I guess to answer that question, I think the purpose of creation of this fund is to begin planning ahead for these types of I don't, you're probably correct that $10,000 doesn't go very far into this world, but this is the idea behind this was to create a fund which will be populated with appropriations going forward as well for that purpose.
Thank you, Brendan. Do we have another comment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ms. Clemens, so this might actually prefer an interactive part of this if we can. I just want to ask, you have the articles that are the reserve funds. You have 500,000. You just talked about. You just explained to everybody that you have $1.8 million in surplus, right? So you have $1.8 million in surplus. So you're considering, I just want to make sure we've got the wording right. So in other words, these reserve funds for some reason, because you have this bucket of $1.8 million, and for some reason you feel it necessary to ask the voters for approval for the reserve funds, right? Do I have that correct? It's the same surplus bucket list that the surplus is in? Is that correct?
I'm unclear if this is, you're discussing Article 9. Is that what you're referring to? Because we're all staying in order here
But
tonight.
I'm just, maybe because I didn't stand up fast enough, because I want to go back to I need the distinction.
I'll allow it, but can you be direct with your question and ask one question? We're not going to have a dialogue back and forth.
Okay, so here's my question. You guys have for some reason, out of the bucket of 1.8 million, you have somehow decided in your minds that the $1 million that's going for the three reserve funds, 500, the 300, and 200, are considered something that they're surplus, so they need to go onto the warrant. So why is it that somehow, if you have $1.8 million in surplus, you're somehow distinguishing the $700,000 as not being part of that bucket, and it doesn't deserve needing to be part of the warrant?
Thank you. Thanks. We'll move there. Comment from Select Board Brennan. I think you might have to shout, or can we bring another mic up?
I don't know if this is going to work. Can anybody hear me? No? All right, I'm going to talk really loud. Basically, we had the $1.8 million. We also had $100,000 that was already supposed to have been spent in 2023 for police things. And because of the supply chain, they didn't come through. And the auditors told us that $100,000 is not part of this surplus. So that left us 1.7. And what we did was say, we're going to offer $700,000 to be put into the general budget so that we don't have to collect that amount of taxes. And when we do our tax assessment, or whatever you call it, right, thank you. Is that better? Yes. It's better for me. When we do our tax, whatever you call it, setting the tax rate, we will know that we don't have to raise, we're not raising that amount of money, $700,000, if you vote for it. You don't have to vote for it. If we had put $700,000 on the warrant separately, then you could have a situation where we say we're figuring that in our budget, plus we have a $700,000 article. What would happen if you voted, yes on one and no on the other, or yes on both? What would that be? $1,400,000? What we asked our attorney was, is this okay to do it this way, and explain it tonight? And we're doing that tonight. So that's what you're seeing. If you don't like it, you can vote no. And in terms of having the surplus and deciding we'll carve it into we suggested three separate buckets for those things that need funding going down the road. We did that because it's, $1 million isn't very much, unfortunately, these days, but it is saving towards some things. In addition, when we were doing the budgeting, the departments were coming to us and making some recommendations. These things that have just been read to you, a lot of that is housekeeping because some things are no longer appropriate in terms of titles because we've already got a public safety building, so we changed that name if you vote for it. And so basically we're saying the Department of Public Works said, we'd like some seed money, $10,000 for that particular item so that we can start doing some road work. So we're trying to save money. If there's anything you don't like, you just vote no, okay?
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Marcia. We're going to move on to the Article 10 now. Shall the voters approve the creation of a culverts fund with the purpose of installing and replacing culverts within the town's responsibility with an initial amount of $150,000? Any public comment on this article?
First comment again. I repeat a question that I apparently didn't ask clearly enough under Article 4. I've got a pair of questions. The first question is, what do you project the total municipal tax rate to be? In the hypothetical instance that you have the present grand list and your articles all passed. I'd like to hear an answer to that. And why is
I'm
it here?
going to remind Irv, and I'm going to remind everybody that, I'm going in order of the articles. We are now on Article 10.
I didn't, Dan, I asked the question.
The board is entitled, and you are entitled, of course, to ask your questions, and the board is entitled to answer as best they can.
Respect, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
It's related to Article 10, because the issue on Article 10 is, apparently all of any potential tax increase is being characterized as an increase in outside articles. This Article 10 is being listed as an outside article. It is the bulk of the projected 40% increase in outside articles.
Fair.
To me, that is disingenuous, if not downright misleading. And I want an explanation of the total projected tax rate with Article 10 considered as part of the town tax rate.
Thank you. Ben?
So I will answer this with a huge caveat that right now we have a grand list that is in flux, and we have an educational tax rate which is in flux. So I can say that when this was looked at back in November and voted on in December, our finance director calculated a total homestead tax rate of 2.6833, a total non-residential tax rate of 2.5549. So if that answers the question of what those tax rates were estimated to be back in November and December, that's the only answer we can give you.
I asked about municipal, not homestead rate, the municipal rate to pay for the town expenses, not the homestead rate which has to do with schools. Thank you.
My answer is remains that was what was calculated in the tax discussion.
Thank you. All right, moving along. Right, go ahead.
My answer there is when we calculated this, we looked at this, and all the only numbers I have right now are the totals with those estimates included, not just the municipal broken out tonight.
Sure.
Hi, it's Harry Roberts. I have a question about Article 10, culvert fund. So how do we pay for culverts prior to establishing a fund? And if we increase the DPW budget every year that included previously culverts, why do we need a culvert fund now? That's my question.
Okay, good question. So we have various sizes of culverts. We have small projects, we have medium-sized projects, we have large projects. Most of the small culvert projects are done through the operational budget of the DPW. Some of the medium size are done that way, and most of the large are done through outside grant resources. So when this culvert replacement fund was proposed, it was to start putting aside money that the town could use as matching funds if needed for these larger projects.
Can I just say, we have 1,000 culverts in this town? 1,000.
Everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Mark?
Not including driveways.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to Article 11. And just want to remind everybody, democracy is not always easy, and speakers don't always work, but we're here tonight to hash these things out, and that's what we're doing. And I, for one, appreciate everyone's comments, and I appreciate the comments of the board and the town manager. Article 11. Shall the voters approve the use of $300,000 of the current surplus to fund the Fire Apparatus Fund number 6? Sir, and again to the microphone.
Okay, for each of these three now, where did these numbers come from, except they add up to 1 million? Is something to be actually accomplished with these funding? Is there a plan, some goals? What do they represent? Just that they add up to 1 million? Or is there something more meaningful behind this?
Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned, this was a deliberative process of the select board. In January, we held 2 informational and outreach meetings to citizens of Norwich, and we asked people for ideas. Prior to that, the select board had identified these 3 potential funds to be allocated surplus monies that would help them in the future for those stated goals. So I know the fire apparatus fund was looked at by the fire department as basically catching up for deferred investment that had gone on in that line item for a while. Okay, being told holding the mic too close. The second one was the $200,000 for the DPW garage. What we had heard was that, the DPW garage needs substantial improvement and renovation. So $200,000 is not going to complete that, but we wanted to start that fund out of the surplus money so that we have somewhere to begin. That will be a deliberative process as well, where we look at what are the needs, what are the costs, and come up with a plan for how to use that $200,000 or future allocations. And then the $500,000, as I mentioned, is not going to solve all of the issues at Tracy Hall, but that was a number that we thought was a significant set aside that will help pay for future renovations, investment, wherever that takes us. We don't have a firm plan right now on what that will be. We're studying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, sir. So I'm going to let you follow up quickly, but I'm moving on. We got the school board. I've got parents waiting. And if you, do you have a direct question about this article? The article about the fire apparatus fund? Do you have a comment about that?
My question is, was there funding in the plan already from previous years for this activity to make improvements to Tracy Hall? Surely that's been a discussion point for years and years to improve it. So does this represent a new funding source, or just this is a new funding source for something that was set up? There was funding already to accomplish this, improvements to Tracy Hall in the past? Yes?
So there is an existing Tracy Hall fund. This money would be on top of what's currently there, and it would help us, again, for future renovation needs, have a reserve source.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. We're going to move on now to Article 13, which we've already dipped into. Shall the voters approve the use of $500,000 of the current surplus to fund the Tracy Hall Fund number 13 for future improvements to Tracy Hall? And if you have comments or questions, please go to the mic and please tell us your name.
Cheryl Lindbergh. So this is where, in my opinion, I'm making a comment, the additional $700,000 belongs. Not in July to buy down a tax rate for an overly aggressive capital budgeting plan that was put together. We don't have a capital plan yet in the town. We'll take the $700,000 and put it into this building that we desperately need to rehabilitate. And so, without an article to vote $700,000 in surplus, it's my hope that that will not be used as a one-time buy down, and that that money will end up in this Tracy Hall Reserve Fund.
Thank you for the comments. Any other comments on Article 13, Tracy Hall Fund? No other comments. Okay, so as we agreed upon earlier, we are now going to shift gears slightly and move up to Articles 39 through 41, I'm sorry. And before I read the articles and invite public comment, I'm going to invite Neil Odell to come up of the school board to make a presentation about the school budget.
Peter, why don't you come here while I'm setting up, you can introduce the board members.
We're going to get going in about a half a minute. We're going to have introduction of the school board members momentarily. So, Garrett, you're going to introduce the school board? And if you don't have a mic, you just have to speak loudly. Oh, you got a mic. Okay, good. Okay, great.
Is this working?
Turning it on, Alex.
That works, okay? All right, for the school board presentation, thank you all very much. My name is Garrett Palm, I'm the chair of the school board. To my left, I have Neil Odell, who will be doing the presentation. And also to my right here, I have Lisa Christie. You are the vice chair, right?
Yes.
Of the school board? Yes. Sorry, there's so many boards that we lose our position.
You can also play the SAT chair.
And also the SAT chair. We have Willie Tryman. It's only been 10 years. And Michael Costa, also members of our school board. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. So for the past couple of years, my colleagues and I on the school board have been warning all of us about an impending education property tax rate increase heading for Norwich. The result of a change in the state's funding formula. I am here to say that this FY25 budget is the first year for this change. What we have warned about is now here. Every year in budgeting presents a whole host of challenges, but I gotta say this year, and even with CATV watching, this year sucked. It was messy. It was tricky, it was challenging, and I gotta say, extremely frustrating. But I think we got through it. I guess we'll find out tomorrow after all of you guys go get a chance to vote. I'm gonna start at the end tonight, and that's the projected tax rate increase for the school district. This board recognizes that this is not a trivial, this is not an insignificant increase. This is a big deal, right? All of us on the board agonized over this for months, the weeks leading up to the final vote on this. We know that this is hard. But what I hope to show you over the next several slides is a couple of things. One, that this was largely out of our local board's control. But secondly, that this budget that we're putting forward is actually necessary to maintain the programs and the services at MCS. I'd like to give you just a brief view of this year's roller coaster. So we began the budgeting process back in August of 23. At that point in time, we were missing several of the key numbers that would allow us to forecast a property tax rate. On December 1st of every year, the tax commissioner issues their December 1 tax letter and provides to us a forecast for the property yield number. The property yield number is one of the key figures that we need in order to be able to forecast a property tax rate for all of you folks. What we still couldn't do at that time, though, was estimate the tax rate increase because there were other key figures that we were still missing, namely the new weighted student count that we needed. That came early in January. Then at the board's January 11th meeting, we actually approved a budget. At that meeting, we were still working with a provision in the law that provided for a 5% tax rate cap increase. We were going to trip that regardless because of the change in our number of equalized or weighted students. So with that 5% cap, the board considered adding additional funds to the budget, knowing that we, at that stage, were not going to impact the tax rate. So at that meeting, we made a decision to add an additional $1.425 million to the budget, knowing that it wasn't going to change the property tax rate. Then, on January 19th, all school boards in the state received a letter from the chairs of the House Ways and Means Committee and Senate Finance Committee up in Montpelier, essentially asking all of us to revisit our budgets and to reconsider our spending. Problem is that we weren't the only school district to consider adding money to our budget. When other school districts did that as well, it started to drive up the pressure on the education fund in the state of Vermont. So much so that it started to drive down the property yield number. We'll get to this a little bit later in the presentation, but that process then triggered even more school districts to trip the 5% cap, which then caused them to consider adding more money to their budgets to take advantage of it. The whole thing became this giant feedback loop, and the burden on the education fund skyrocketed. Rebecca had mentioned this earlier tonight. At one point, we were looking at a 20% or 20% increase for property taxes statewide. Not just in Norwich, every town in the state was looking at a really significant property tax rate increase. The legislature was worried that they couldn't afford it, and they were probably right. On January 23rd, in light of the letter that we received from House Ways and Means and Senate Finance, the Norwich School Board reconsidered the budget and made the decision to remove that $1.425 million. I skipped over the fact that on January 19th, Board Chair Garrett Palm went and testified in front of House Ways and Means Committee regarding the impact that Act 127 was having on our town and the serious implications that it had for Norwich. On February 22nd, then, because the legislature was grappling with how are they going to fund all of this, they decided to change the law while we were already working on and approving budgets. So, H-850 was fast-tracked through both the House and the Senate and signed by the governor on February 22nd, and it removed the 5% tax rate cap provision. It's now been replaced by a cent discount on the tax rate. We'll go through a little bit of the details on that later on in the presentation. But we ran the numbers, and at that point in time, the projected tax rate was now looking at 18% increase. On February 27th, this board got together for one final time to consider whether or not we wanted to make any further changes to the budget and if we wanted to delay the vote on the budget. That was one of the provisions that was available to us when the governor signed H-850. If we wanted to reconsider changes to the budget, we had the opportunity to delay the vote. At that meeting, the board decided not to change the budget and to move forward with the vote. You will see this then on the ballot when you show up tomorrow.
There are several factors that influence the tax rate here in Norwich. Some of these things the board has direct control over, and some we have very little to no control over. But a few of those things are actually some of the figures that are changing most this year. So I wanted to walk through each of these with you tonight. First up is the MCS budget. This is the amount of money that it takes for us to educate our students pre-K through 6 at the Marion Cross School here just across the road. The next item is the Dresden budget. This is the amount of money that is necessary to run the Richmond Middle School and the Hanover High School students in grades 7 through 12. Third is the number of students, or more accurately, the number of weighted students. And this is one of the numbers that is changing significantly this year. Fourth are the yield numbers, set by the legislature each year, typically at the end of the legislative session. And these will change based on the health of the education fund, but also based on the total amount of voter-approved school budgets throughout the entire state. Last is the common level of appraisal, which is just a means of adjusting property values based on current sales. So first, let's talk a little bit then about the MCS budget. The MCS budget is up just over $700,000 or 9.66%. But let's dig into this figure just a little bit. This overall increase includes almost $107,000 for facilities improvements, the top portion of this bar graph. These are the first year costs of a multi-year facilities improvement project and includes replacement of an underground oil tank, replacing our current oil burner boilers to propane, converting our heating system from steam to hot water, and completing some weatherization work, some new windows, tightening of the building envelope. The next layer down is a cost of just over $316,000, which are back wages that were due to the teachers as the result of a prolonged teacher contract negotiations that we finally settled last year. While prior budgets included the cost of steps in our normal step and track system, this contract needed to make up for the base increases that were agreed to during our negotiations. Next on the stack is the increase associated with statewide negotiated health care benefits. Health care costs this year are up over 16%. Finally, the remaining amount, almost $197,000, is from other miscellaneous changes from the budget. So, if we view this as the amount of discretionary spending that the board had control over during the budgeting process, this increase would account for just a 2.71% increase from last year's budget. So there's two items in the budget that can have significant impact on the tax rate, and that's enrollment and staffing. Enrollment is important because student counts have a large impact on the property tax rate. Staffing is important because salaries and benefits make up the single largest portion of our budget. You can see from this graph, last year we anticipated that we would have 341 students this year. That number came in at 323. We are anticipating a slight uptick for next year, 329 students. These figures include students pre-K through 6. Overall staffing is ticking up slightly to a total of 54.95. This does include the reduction of one classroom teacher, a slight increase in our English as a second language instruction, and an increase for our LEAP program, plus adding a 1.0 FTE as a computer technician repair person. These are the proposed class sizes for next year. So you see we have two sections in kindergarten, two sections in pre-K 4th and 6th, 3 sections in all of the other classes. Moving on to expenditures. What we see here from this view in the budget is just how much money is devoted to both regular and special education. Almost all in the form of salaries, payroll taxes, and benefits. Those two categories combined contribute 62% of our expenditure budget. So let's take a look at some of those expenditure changes proposed in this budget. First up, regular education, the bar at the top there. That is up, as we previously mentioned, due to the settlement for the teachers in those contract negotiations, along with that 16% increase in health care benefits. Technology line item is up due to that change in 1.0 FTE, the addition of a computer technician. The decrease in special education is largely a result in the change in student needs in the building. School board services is up mostly due to costs for legal counsel associated with those very same negotiations plus mediation. And finally, the SAU assessment is up due to some personnel changes in our SAU office, the administrative office that oversees it, but also to correct an error from last year where we actually under budgeted that amount. Moving on to revenues. Revenues are up from last year by 4.65%. Next year, we anticipate a tuition increase to double to just over $28,000. The amount that we receive in our block grant for special education will be up next year, just over $150,000. Special education extraordinary aid is down, but it's also down on the expense side. As we mentioned before, a change in student needs. And finally, last year was the final year of the transfer of construction aid money resulted to the Dresden project from several years ago. That was the MCS budget. I want to move on to the Dresden budget now. The Dresden budget was covered in detail last week, but I can just give you the highlights here for this evening. Dresden budget is actually down this year, over $872,000, or down 2.8%, which means that the Dresden amount that is assessed to Norwich is also down. It's down 2.73%, or just over $224,000. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about weighted students tonight because this is one of the biggest changes this year. Our weighted student count has changed to 828.89. Now, some of you that have been paying attention may be wondering, wait a minute, you kept telling us that the weighted student count was going down, and this number is dramatically higher than the one you showed us last year. That's true, but the change in the funding formula was such that we can't compare last year's number to this year's number because the entire basis for the formula changed. The net effect, though, is that this count is down when we look at how we compare with all of the other school districts in the state. Because of the change in formula, however, and because this number is dramatically higher, it forced a change in another number in the formula, and that are the yield numbers, both the property and the income yield numbers. A brief explanation of what these yield numbers do, what they represent. Our system of education financing provides some measure of local control. All right? School districts and communities get to decide how much money they want to spend in their schools, but it's the state's responsibility to make sure that they raise all of that money. Put another way, all of you get to decide how much we spend at Marion Cross, but once we decide that, the state is responsible for raising that revenue. And one of the key factors then that the state uses in making sure that they raise enough money is through the yield numbers. The yield numbers this year are dramatically lower than they were last year, in part because of the change in the weighted student counts. So right now this year we're looking at a property yield number of $9,775 and an income yield number of $10,191. These figures, if you've been watching, these will change throughout the rest of this session as new revenue sources are considered in the education fund, as voter-approved budgets start to being reported back to Montpelier, and they take a look at all of those things considered. These numbers will change up until the end of the legislative session when they are finally set. The last factor, the final factor in the tax rate calculation is the common level of appraisal. And for the 5th year in a row, we anticipate, or we've been told, that the common level of appraisal is going to decline, down to 67.57. And because this number is used in the denominator of the tax rate calculation, when the CLA goes down, the tax rate goes up. There's one thing that I want to note here, though. We are going through a reappraisal currently, and the school board has been told that we anticipate the reappraisal to be done in time for the August tax bills. So likely what will happen is that the tax rate that we are showing you here tonight is not going to match the tax rate that you see on your tax bill. In fact, what you're likely to see on your tax bill is a tax rate that is much, much lower than the one that we're showing you here tonight. Don't get all excited, because with the lower tax rate, because the CLA has popped back up to near 100%, also means quite likely that your property values have increased. The net effect is that the tax burden, the amount of money that you pay, is going to be about the same. When I say same as in consider that 18% tax rate increase that we talked about before. Okay. Before we jump into the tax rate calculation, I want to talk a little bit about the glide path provision that was originally provided in Act 127 and has now been replaced with the bill that was just passed and signed by the governor, H. 850. Originally, the law provided for a tax cap on the rate increase. If the rate increased more than 5% in your district, it would be capped at a 5% increase. Some school districts, I had mentioned before, were taking advantage of this provision in the law and had added additional spending to their budgets. This was something that shouldn't necessarily have come as a huge surprise. School districts across the state of Vermont have been dealing with the loss of construction aid funding since 2007. A lot of our buildings in the state of Vermont need repair. They need fixing. Marion Cross is not the only one. There are other schools that are worse off than we are. And by and large, school districts were using that tax cap as an opportunity to fund facilities improvements. But as we mentioned before, the problem was when everybody started to do that, the system got a little out of control in this feedback loop, and suddenly every school district in the state was tripping that 5% cap. The legislature made the change. And what we're now looking at, instead of the 5% tax rate cap, we're looking at a cent discount on the tax rate. The way that this works is that we compare each district's share of weighted students under the old formula against each district's share of weighted students under the new formula and calculate the percentage difference. We get 1 cent discount for every percentage point decrease in the weighted student count. Bottom line, what that means for Norwich is that we're looking at a 19-cent tax rate discount with the new provision. This discount, though, is phased out over the next 5 years. So in year 1 in FY25, we've got available to us a 19-cent tax rate discount, but next year it's only going to be 15 cents. The year after that, 11, then 8, then 4, then no discount. Okay, so let's talk then about the formulas. For the property tax rate, you take per pupil spending, divide that by the property yield number to give you your equalized tax rate. New this year, we subtract out 19 cents on that tax rate before applying the CLA to get to the final tax rate. For income sensitized payments, same formula basis where you start with per pupil spending, this time divide by the income yield number, multiply that by the fixed income rate of 2% to get your income tax rate. What you will note here is that the discount only applies to the property tax formula, not the income sensitized formula. So let's look at these numbers then for Marion Cross. So you take the Marion Cross budget, you add to that the Dresden assessment to get the total expenditures, subtract out the revenues to get to net education spending. We then take the net education spending and divide that by the long-term weighted ADM. That's the new term for the equalized pupil numbers, the one that's changed this year. We then get net ed spending per long-term weighted ADM. We divide that by the property yield number that we saw before. That gets our equalized homestead tax rate. We then take 19 cents off of that to get to our discounted tax rate. Divide that by the CLA to get an estimated homestead tax rate of 2.3557. This is the number that is the 18% increase. If you look at the income sensitized rate, those numbers work out to 3.4181%. All right, enough of the numbers. What do you get for what you paid for? This slide can be a little bit dense or a little bit confusing. Where I want you to focus your eyes, though, is on the lower right-hand corner. So this is the iReady math assessment. This is a nationally normed assessment that we just started using at Marion Cross to track student outcomes. If you look at the bar graph on the lower right-hand side, there are two numbers there. There's a 61% and a 21%. Add those together, 82%. 82% of our students in math, school-wide, are testing at or above grade level. Similarly, those numbers for English language arts, 74% plus 14%, 88% of our students in ELA are testing at or above grade level. Similarly, if you look to the Vermont Common Assessment Program, the percentage of our students in those grades that are testing proficient, 76 up to 92%, well above the state averages. Marion Cross is a great school. It's doing a great job by our kids. I will break there because I think you want to go into some of the other articles. I just want to briefly say a huge thank you to Principal Sean Gagna. Great job of running Marion Cross School. A huge thanks to all of our teachers, all of the support staff at that school, everyone that's involved. Thank you so much. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Robin Steiner. Jay Adams is not here with us tonight. Thank you, Jeannie Teague, Business Administrator, for getting us through the budgeting process. But thank all of you for supporting Marion Cross and also the Dresden School District. We couldn't do this without your support, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, Miguel, for that very informative presentation. We really appreciate it. Now I'm going to read Article 39 through Article 41 and welcome public comment or questions for the school board. Article 39, to authorize the Board of School Directors to borrow money by issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenues for the next fiscal year in accordance with the provisions of 16 VSA Section 562(9). Any comments or questions? Article 40. Shall the voters of the Norwich Town School District determine and fix the salaries of the school board members in the sum of $500 each per year for a total of $2,500 in accordance with the provisions of 16 VSA Section 562(5). Comments, questions? Article 41. Shall the voters of the Norwich Town School District approve the school board to expend $7,946,835, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing 2024-2025 fiscal year. Comments or questions for the board?
Rich McDowell from Buckroad. So looking at your budget numbers for last year and this year for the two schools, It appears that the budget expenditure, more for one, less for the other, is about the same, right, between last year and this year? The cost.
Are we referring to Marion Cross versus Dresden?
Looking at them both together, the Marion Cross was plus 700, and the Dresden number was down minus like 700, 600, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's almost the same number, within 100,000 or so.
Oh, the total for
total.
last.
So while that's true, when Dresden is down 700,000, you don't see the whole total effect of that because you're approximately 32% of Dresden's change. So the change coming back out to Norwich, I believe, is lower by about 224,000. Yeah.
So I guess the essence of my question is, if those numbers are relatively similar between last year and this year, but now we're looking at a 18% increase in our cost as far as the tax burden goes, all that 18% is going to where? Other parts of the state? We're subsidizing everybody else's schools? Is that the effect of all of this?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to.
Any other questions or, oh, yes, sir.
I have a question. Harry Roberts. If I've read or heard different opinions that perhaps if districts did not approve their budgets, and I don't think that would happen in town, we always approve your budget, but if that were to happen, would it have any beneficial effect? Because that's what I was reading, different opinions say if everyone, or there were a lot of school budgets that were voted down because the rates were going up, that maybe the legislature or some other action would take place to correct what perhaps is unfair funding and stuff. That's my question. Was there any effect that voting down the budget would have in a positive manner for the North?
Thank you.
I'm not, I hear what you're saying, I'm not seeing one at the moment. So, the challenge is, so if our budget was voted down, then this body here has some work to do to figure out, well, what's the new budget that we bring forward to you for approval? And I will say that we've run various different scenarios. We would need to cut a significant amount out of this budget to appreciably change that tax rate increase. So much so that it would actually end up impacting the programs and the services that we operate at that school. And so I think you're looking then at a school system that looks very different than the one that we're operating today. What I do know is that when H-850 was passed, implicit with that passage was an understanding that the legislature would consider changes to the funding formula. We anticipate that that work is going to begin in earnest now, but it will not complete during this session, likely continue over the summer, and probably will be taken up in the next legislative session. I will say that I think the state of Vermont is at a crossroads when it comes to public education, not only in terms of how we fund it, but also in terms of what we value from public education. And if any of you folks have any opinion on this matter, I encourage you, reach out to your legislators. Reach out to Rebecca, reach out to Jim. We also have senators, Allison Clarkson, Becca White, Dick McCormick. Let them know how you feel, because that is the body that's going to be changing the formula if they do change it. And while my colleagues and I on the board here will try to have as much of a voice in that process, those are the folks that are going to be in charge of making that change.
Sir.
Russ, North Upper Hill Road. I recently moved here to Norwich, and I have to compliment the board on its really hard work and the fact that it hasn't shied away from maintaining a quality education here in Norwich. It's really a thankless job, and I definitely agree with Neil. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Thank you for the comment.
I guess I have a very simple question, not understanding all this stuff you were presenting here. But say we had more students in the school here, without any the increase in the number of teaching staff, increase the class size. Would that change anything here on the bottom line in terms of the equalization and all the rest of it?
Yes.
In what way?
It would be a positive change. It would lower your tax rate. More students in the system to be careful, right? More students in the system without increasing expenditures will lower the tax rate. But it's also a little bit more nuanced than that. More students in particular categories, because those students are weighted, have a bigger effect on lowering the tax rate.
So what this tells me is we need more people in Norwich, we need more housing, right? Won't change Norwich, the character of it, what it looks like. More people, more housing won't be in the middle of Norwich, they'll be out somewhere on Route 5. Isn't this in our collective interest? Now there's a bigger base to share the increased budget. We should be doing this.
Appreciate the comment. Anyone else on Article 21? Yes.
Hi, I'm Adam from Pike Road. This is an incredibly helpful presentation. You walked through a very complicated situation. I'll just say that the 3 slides on test scores are impressive and are about this much of everything that you're doing incredibly at Marion Cross School. There is so much more than those 3 sets of test scores. In terms of what happens in those classrooms, the support for those kids, and this budget and all the work that you do is behind that. And the test scores are a great part, but such a small part of the incredible work that the teachers and staff do. So thank
You were absolutely right. There was definitely a whole lot of stuff that I left off. And I gave you 3 slides, and if I could flip the script, 20 slides should have been about what's going on in that school, and 1 slide about how we spend for it. Unfortunately, we've got such a complex formula that, it's where we are. Yes.
I'm Mary McGavern of Old Orchard Road, and I have 2 questions. One is, could you give a really quick overview of the change in the weighted students formula? Like, what are the changes? Is it kids who qualify for free lunch? Is it just what are the factors that make one student weighted more than the other? And then the other one is, I guess, a comment with a request for affirmation that I'm basing my comment on the road things. And so when someone said, are we subsidizing the school budgets throughout the state? I want to remind us all that, as far as I know, whereas most states say that each student has the right to an adequate education, which can be set pretty darn low, every student in Vermont has the right to equal access to education funding. And that's a profoundly different thing. And so, yes, we're subsidizing other districts, but also we're keeping that promise to every kid in Vermont that they get an equal shot at good school funding. And is that still the case?
The second part of the comment that I certainly agree with. The first part is dealing with the student weights. So the weights that changed, the big changes were students who have English as a second language, those weights went up. Students from lower socioeconomic scale students are weighted more. There were new weights for small and rural schools. We are not a small or a rural school. There were some changes in the weights for secondary level students. The biggest issue that we've got here in Norwich is that all of the areas where those weights increased are areas that we don't have a lot of.
Thank you. I'm Brad Lyon, Kerwood Hill Road. Thank you all for all that you do, and I would agree that Marion Cross, I couldn't be more happy with the school. If I understood correctly, was it 18.2%? Is that the estimated tax increase? 18.2%. But did I understand correctly that is there's wiggle, that's not a set in stone yet number. So just, do we have any sense, ballpark, is it like, what's the plus or minus realistically that we might expect when the dust, if it ever settles, and when it's more settled, what's that number look like?
I am not going to take that bet tonight.
Okay.
But
Like
yeah.
plus or minus 10%, 5%?
Oh, God.
It really is all over.
It really is all over the map. Only to say, right, that so one of the biggest factors, right, is the change in that yield number. And that yield number is going to depend on sources of revenue into the education fund, but it's also going to depend on voter-approved school budgets all across the state. So one potential scenario, like people could go out tomorrow, right, and vote down school budgets all across the state. And school boards would be like, oh crap, what do we do now? We got to go back and craft new budgets and bring them before the voters. Likely they're going to be lower. I mean, that could lower the draw on the ed fund, right, which raises then the yield number. But if you're asking me to give you a plus or minus tonight, I'm not going to do it, right? I'm not going to do it. What I hope is that it's not as bad as 18%. So, come those tax bills in August, I'm hoping that it's going to be somewhat lower than 18%, but don't quote me tonight. Sorry.
Why don't we
Thank you.
make the promise that as we get new information, we can post
Yeah, Jamie's absolutely right. So as we get new figures and as the legislature finally sets those yield numbers at the end of the session, we will make sure to get that information out to all of you so that you know what it's going to be before the tax bill shows up.
Go ahead.
As I do every year, I'd like to remind everybody not to ignore the income adjustment to your school property tax. And you could have a family income that's well over $100,000 and still qualify for some income-based adjustment to the tax on the home and the 2 acres surrounding it. That system protects you against CLA. It doesn't protect you against all the other factors that Neil described, but it does protect you against the declining CLA and changes in the value, the resale value of your home. I'm deeply disappointed to hear that the cent discount system doesn't protect the income payer. So that's actually shifting the burden somewhat from the property tax payer to the income-based payer. But it's still better than not having it.
Any comment? Any response? No? Okay. All right, any other comments or questions about Article 41? I want to give everybody a chance. I'm erring on the side of allowing everyone to say their piece tonight. I hope you can see that. But now we're going to go back to the agenda, and that is we're going to start with Article 14. And these are, we're going to continue with the warrants, and I'm going to start at Article 14. All right?
Can I take one moment on the program?
Yeah, go ahead, hang on. Yes, good. What's you want to make one comment about school issues?
Sorry, I just want to thank Neil for obviously this presentation here. I think as most of you may or may not know, I mean, Neil's president of the was just president of the Vermont School Board Association, a position that he held and stepped down most recently. The reason that I was actually doing the testimony that day is because he was actually on a flight to the National School Board Association meeting. He just sent me an opinion piece that he wrote last July that I had no idea that he had written, which was supporting public education. So a big proponent of public education in the state. So I'd like to thank Neil and the rest of the school board here for all the help. And the second thing I think is I would just like to ask everyone, so as Neil said, please contact your legislatures, but I would ask that the communications are constructive, thoughtful, and considerate, because as much as we're all very angry, myself included, Norwich being the worst hit by this of any town in the state, we do need our legislature's help to change this, and as Neil said, we are looking to work constructively with everyone at the state level, so the more thoughts and ideas that everyone has, obviously expressing your opinions and desires, but we do need to do it in a constructive manner.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to mention that we have teachers and staff here tonight of Marion Cross School. Just want to acknowledge that. Okay, so Article 14. You follow along in your programs at home. Article 14. Shall the voters appropriate $15,000, $947 to advanced transit to be used to help cover operating costs and providing matching funds for grants for the support of providing public transportation services? Any comments on Article 14 or questions about Article 14, advanced transit? Sir, yes, and to the microphone, please.
Compared all the numbers of the new budget with last year, there's only about 4 things that change in value. Advanced transit and the library. The rest is nothing, just in case maybe that can speed up the process.
We're going to appreciate that suggestion. We're going through the warrant. This is my job. This is what I've been hired to do. So we're going to move forward. Article 15, shall the voters appropriate $20,000 to the Cemetery Commission under 18 VSA Section 5361 to supplement the interest from the Perpetual Care Trust Fund for maintenance of the town's cemeteries? I could go faster. Article 15, any comments about the Cemetery Commission allocation? Seeing none, Article 16, shall the voters appropriate $4,000, $348 to the Child Care Center in Norwich to be used for income-sensitive scholarships for Norwich children? Any representatives from the Child Care or anyone from the Child Care Center in Norwich or anyone like to speak on this article? Article 17. Shall the voters appropriate $6,000 to the Family Place to be used for general program support such as direct service through early intervention, child care payment assistance, healthy baby visits, reach up, welcome baby, parent education, playgroups, and other services? Anyone from the Family Place? Yes.
Good evening, Lauren Miranda-Rin, board member for the Family Place, and just wanted to say that the Family Place provides critical services, including to many families in Norwich, and just we deeply appreciate the support from the community for $6,000 from the Family Place.
Thank you very much. Article 18. Shall the voters appropriate $3,000 to Good Beginnings of the Upper Valley to be used for the support of programs? Anyone want to speak to Good Beginnings of the Upper Valley? All right. Article 19. Shall the voters appropriate $1,704.50 to the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation to be used to offer support for new, growing, and relocating businesses? Any comments on Article 19? Article 20. Shall the voters appropriate $2,500 to Headrest to be used for the operation of a crisis 24/7 hotline? Headrest? All right. Article 21, shall the voters appropriate $3,000 to Junction Arts and Media, JM, formerly known as CATV, for recorded meetings for local government transparency? My apologies. Anyone want to speak to JAM and the wonderful work they've been doing tonight and many other nights? All right. Article 22, shall the voters appropriate $1,500 to the Norwich American Legion to be used for the Legion's Memorial Day observance? Anyone like to speak to the American Legion? All right. Article 23, shall the voters appropriate $10,000 to Norwich Community Nurse, Inc. to be used for partial financial support for the Norwich Community Nurse Project? Yes.
Yes, I'm Brenda Haynes. I'm on the board of the Norwich Community Nurse, and I got the short straw to come and ask the town for an additional $5. Really? $5,000. For 12 hours a week, we get a community nurse who helps hundreds of people during the course of the year, and we would like to pay her for her excellence in her service, and so we're asking the town to support that effort. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. For Article 23? Yeah? Yes.
I'm Heidi Webster. I'm representing the Norwich
Neil and everybody. It's hard to hear up here. Go ahead.
Patty Webster, representing the Norwich Historical Society. We thank you for your appropriation, which has not changed for the last 10 years. It's about 7% of our budget. And we hope you have enjoyed our Norwich history programs and the other opportunities that we provide in Norwich. Thank you.
Beat me to it, but I will read Article 24. Shall the voters appropriate $8,000 to the Norwich Historical Society and Community Center to support those programs that support the celebration of historic events? And we just heard a comment in support. Anybody else? Article 24. All right, Article 25. Shall the voters appropriate $3,500 to the Norwich Lions Club to be used to underwrite the fireworks for the Norwich Fair in celebration of the 260th year of the town's charter? Anyone have any thoughts on fireworks? All right. Article 26. This is a big one. Shall the voters appropriate $365,000 to the Norwich Public Library Association to be used for the operating expenses of the Norwich Library?
Hi, I'm Lucinda Walker, 214 Old Barn Lane, Brownville, Vermont. And Mr. Osborne has left, but yes, we above Advanced Transit are here asking for some more money. Okay, so first we need to start with a huge thank you to any of you who are here or still watching. If you support the library in any way, you vote yes in tomorrow's Article 26. You donate to the annual appeal. You volunteer. You come to our events. You bring your kids to the library. You use the library. Your support this past year helped us break all records. We have had more visits, 32,000 visits. We gave out 243 new library cards. We circulated 62,000 items. That's 18 items for every person who lives in Norwich, from a baby to a 97-and-a-half-year-old also a patron. You did this. You support the library, and it's your enthusiasm and your support that helps us be so successful. So, one thing I want to point out about our increase is that when you use the library, you save money in your personal life. When you check out 2 hardback books, you've actually saved about $50 from buying them from a local store, although buy your stuff in the Norwich Bookstore. We really take your tax money seriously. Our budgets are lean, and librarians love to save money. One way we save money is that we share resources. One huge way we save money many past years is through interlibrary loan. As of this afternoon, the last 365 days, library patrons borrowed 1,232 items from libraries across the country. If we had purchased those items, we would have paid $22,000, and that's a conservative number. So when we share resources, we are spending your tax dollars beautifully. And I just want to put one more thing out there. The people who work with the library, I love them, and I hope you love them too, because they show up every day ready to help you find what you need. If you need to download a tax form, you need to fax something, you need to learn how to use Libby, or you've got a new tablet and you don't know how to even turn it on, or you want to put your printer so you can print to your phone. We're there to help you, and we've seen a real increase in the number of people in crisis in this town and in surrounding communities, and they are requiring a higher level of service. And we are able to do it because of personal development through the library, learning about how to deal with people who are in crisis, and we're happy to do it. That's why we're there. So I come to you every year, and I say thanks to you. It's working. Please sustain this wonderful place you have built, and I talked way too long, sorry.
Thank you, Lucinda. And just because we saved these articles for last doesn't mean this isn't some of the most important stuff on the ballot. Article 27, shall the voters appropriate $1,822 to the Public Health Council of the Upper Valley to be used for continuing public health education for Norwich residents, particularly in the area of substance abuse, elder care, oral health, emergency preparedness, and healthy living. Any comments on Article 27?
Yes.
Hi, good evening. I'm Tracy Hayes. I'm a Norwich resident, and I also work for the Public Health Council as a business administrator part-time. We are a trusted organization that has been supporting the Upper Valley for many, many years. People, professionals, organizations working together in collaboration. There's 34 communities that we work together. Our mission is to improve health in all of the Upper Valley residents in the ways that we've already talked about. We ask the towns for a little bit of support for flexibility. Most of the funding comes through grants and or small administrative fees to support small organizations that don't have business capacity to manage their own grants and then show responsibility with that funding. As you know, in public health, everything is grant driven, so it's a really important service. Also, the Public Health Council responded to a lot of needs during the pandemic, also during the floods. We are a very nimble organization of 1.7 employees, and we work with a lot of partners to be able to pivot when needs arise. We ask for your continued support.
Thank you. Article 28, shall the voters appropriate $1,200 to Senior Solutions, an agency, area agency on aging, to provide social services benefiting Norwich residents aged 60 and older. Article 29, shall the voters appropriate $3,750 to the Southeastern Vermont Community Action to be used for emergency needs, referral to, and assistance with assessing needed services, financial counseling, and food and nutrition education. Any comments on Southeastern Vermont Community Action? Article 30, shall the voters appropriate $2,000 to the Special Needs Support Center of the Upper Valley to help children and adults with special needs and their families meet their unique challenges through advocacy and program support? All right. Article 31, shall the voters appropriate $2,000 to the Upper Valley Trails Alliance to be used for trail planning and work? Anyone from the Upper Valley Trails Alliance? Article 32, shall the voters appropriate $18,500 to the Visiting Nurse Association and Hospice of Vermont, New Hampshire to help support the home health, maternal, and child health and hospice care provided in patients' homes and in community settings? Visiting Nurse Association and Hospice. Article 33, shall the voters appropriate $5,300 to the White River Council on Aging to be used for home-delivered meals, transport, and social services? Article 34, shall the voters appropriate $2,500 to Windsor County Mentors to be used for mentoring youth? Article 35, shall the voters appropriate $2,500 to WISE, Women's Information Service, to be used to support WISE's crisis intervention and support services and prevention education? Comments on WISE? Article 36, shall the voters appropriate $3,000 to Youth in Action to be used for operating expenses that support our community service efforts? Youth in Action. Article 37, shall the voters require that taxes be paid in U.S. funds in 2 installments? Question mark. The first installment will be due and accepted at the Town of Norwich Finance Office on or before 6 p.m. August 30th, 2024, and the balance will be due at the same location on or before 6 o'clock p.m. February 10th, 2005. A legible, official, United States Post Office postmark cancellation, not a postage machine date, I have you note, will determine the payment date for all mailed payments. Interest on overdue taxes will be charged at 1% per month for the first 3 months and 1.5% per month thereafter. All delinquent taxes will be subject to 4% collection fee in accordance with Vermont statutes after February 10th, 2005. 2025. That's quite an article. Any comments on Article 37? Seeing none, we move on to Article 38, to transact any other business that may legally come before the annual Norwich Town Meeting. And what is meant here is that this is an opportunity for folks to raise non-binding measures, such as honoring employees of town and schools, something of that nature, ceremonial nature. Does anyone have anything like that this year? Honored former clerk Bonnie last year at this time. Anybody have any comments or thoughts here? All right. Article 42, to transact any other business that may legally come before the annual meeting of the Norwich Town School District. Same idea. Celebratory, honoring. Okay. That brings us, and as I want to just have a shout out to the former, my mentor in town moderating, John Carroll, who tells me, and you all may know this, been around a long time, we're not actually adjourning this meeting, we're pausing, because the meeting continues into tomorrow. Town meeting's all one entity. And so we'll see you all tomorrow at 9 a.m., but I need a motion to adjourn.
7 a.m.
7 a.m., sorry. I was reading the 9 o'clock alleged time we were ending. 7 a.m. tomorrow, the vote begins. Lily, thank you. And I will entertain, be happy to entertain, or we can stay, a motion to adjourn the meeting until tomorrow morning.
So moved.
Second.
We're not adjourned, right? So I'm going to amend that motion to a pause. All in favor? Aye. All against? Nobody? All right. Thank you, everybody.